Owen Oliver.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club for Monday, October 24th. This is VBC Happy Hour. Excited to have you all here in the room with me tonight. You may have got a little message in the waiting room that said, hey, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties on our end. Gus Pagonis, our guest tonight, is in the room, but he is calling in from his landline, so he'll be able to hear us. But we will not be able to see him. He will see our PowerPoints. He'll see everything that we're showing up on screen. But Gus, can you say hello?
Yep. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, as long as everybody...
I haven't gotten enough IT skill sets here to get this kind of stuff set up. So my granddaughter, my 12-year-old advisor, refused to help me tonight. But Sean pulled it off. Thank you.
So we roll with it here at VBC. Sometimes it happens, and we are going to roll with it. We still have definitely a big evening of conversation going. This is part 2 of our Mobile Riverine Force discussion. It's so weird. Maybe Mobile Riverine Force is cursed in some way because the last time, part 1, was the night that my power went out because of a lightning storm. So somebody is telling me that they don't want me talking about this stuff, which is interesting. So excited to see so many people in the room tonight. Julia, Brad, Ben, Michael, Mark, Jerry Zimmer. I don't believe you and I have had the chance to meet. It's nice to meet you here on Zoom. Bill Moran, we've met before. Lisa Reffner's in the room. Lisa and I have been collaborating, talking about an event at University of Pittsburgh Greensburg that's going to be held for VBC coming up on November 5th. We're excited to have a young crowd there, a young crowd of vets. So we're going to dive in. I'll share my screen here. We'll thank the sponsors. I'll talk a bit about, hey, what we have coming up here with VBC. And then we're going to get right to Gus, and we're going to get a little bit of background because Gus actually had joined us way back in January and talked about most of his time in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Well, we have, MRF to talk about tonight, but we're going to get a little more caught up to speed about that, because back when we talked with them in January, we sort of glossed over Vietnam a touch. So there's a lot of stuff that Gus would like to discuss tonight. Without further ado, I'm going to pop over here. And as you can see, I'm also flying solo tonight. That probably is another way that, of course, I would have difficulties. Todd is out at a talk tonight, got back from the Boston trip that they just took, which I heard was fabulous. They had beautiful weather. I'm sure he's going to be happy to fill you all in on it next time he sees you all. You may see on the screen here, D&D Auto Salvage. They have been wonderful sponsors of the VBC for quite some time. They started as a small hauling and used auto parts operation here in the Pittsburgh area. In the late 1970s, they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations in Lawrenceville and Tarentum. I'm going to admit some more people. We got a big room tonight. This is exciting. Happy to see so many people joining us. Well, anyway, D&D, they accept all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction, and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D, like you see on the screen, D&D spelled out, autosalvage.com. We want to thank them so much for sponsoring the VBC. We also want to thank our longtime sponsor, tobacco-free Adagio Health.
I guess, I don't know.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you, Janet Jones. Sorry to mute you, but we'll get through the sponsors and we'll chat with you soon. Tobacco-free Adagio Health, they, like I said, they've been sponsoring us for quite some time. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking. They want people to quit. So they have a really nice quit line. That's 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Super easy to remember. They have classes. They have nicotine replacement therapy. And they also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Boy, I'm so excited. The little dinger, if you've never been a host on a Zoom program, every time somebody enters the waiting room, you get a little ding, ding, like someone just rang the doorbell. And that thing has been going off in my ear for the last 5 minutes straight, which is a good sign. It's a good sign because that means we have a lot of people joining us tonight for this conversation. Tobacco Free advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all about them and all the classes and everything that they have to offer at Tobacco Free Adagio Health tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Thank you, Tobacco Free, for sponsoring. Some announcements for programs that we have coming up. These are really exciting. Tomorrow night we have Greatest Generation Live, which is our more specific program that's geared towards Greatest Generation. Holocaust survivor and World War II Richie boy Jack Boakey will be joining us tomorrow evening. Glenn Flickinger will be hosting that program. I believe Todd and I will be helping out with that one. So we'll both see you there tomorrow night. Really looking forward to this discussion. Jack has been joining us for a couple weeks now, just sort of coming in and checking out what we have going on. Well, tomorrow night is the focus on his story. Next Monday is Halloween. And if I miss that, my daughter will kill me. So I will be off next Monday night. Not to worry. I think Todd also has potentially a conflict, which means that Glenn might be pulling double duty. He's going to do a Monday night and Tuesday night, but it's open conversation next Monday. Bring some topics. Help Glenn out. Whenever you come to the Zoom room on next Monday, if you want to talk about something, bring it up in the open conversation. I'm sure Glenn would love to have that part of his show next Monday evening at 7 p.m. It's also Halloween, so maybe you have some Halloween-specific veteran stories that you'd like to share. Brad, I'm going to call out you. Brad, do you have any Halloween stories? Did people dress up in the Marine Corps?
No, I don't have any, unfortunately. It seems like Halloween is not celebrated too often in the Marine Corps. I mean, on base housing, I'm sure there is, but I can think of a heck of a lot of ways to scare the heck out of kids, but
and you know what? Because of whenever we flipped the switch at the COVID, when COVID happened, and we were like, we're going to do these online programs. This is how VBC is going to go from now on until we can get back to in-persons. We came across Brad Washabaugh, and he's been phenomenal. He's now on our board. We love Brad, and I've never got to meet Brad in person. Well, that gets to change. On November 5th, I finally get to meet Brad Washabaugh, who is the proud owner of a beautiful, was it silver blue? It is a beautiful blue. And what year Corvette?
It's a 2003 Z06 electron blue Corvette. Very nice.
Electron blue. Just, mwah. I asked Brad if I could drive it, and I have a little bit of experience with that. So, I mean, I wouldn't just drive it straight into a wall. I can drive a stick. So Brad, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
But looking forward to also meeting you in person, Brad.
Sounds good.
Jack Boakey, I see that your hand is up, but you may have stepped away from your camera. We'll get to you once I see you reappear on your screen. And then next Tuesday night, like I said, Glenn's going to be pulling double duty. We're going to be talking the New Guinea campaign on Greatest Generation Live. That is in collaboration with the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. I actually had the Wisconsin Veterans Museum on the Scuttlebutt, the podcast that I host weekly. Great group, amazing museum. Really happy that they are going to be joining us for a live program next Tuesday at 7 p.m. To talk New Guinea's Ghost Mountain. This should be a wonderful conversation with author James Campbell and Henry Shepke. You'll see his name on there. Henry Shepke. He is our young member of the VBC who joins us all the time, writes to all of the veterans to get their autograph. He's great. He's sort of in collaboration with Glenn for this specific program. So don't miss it. Whole bunch of great stuff coming up. And as I mentioned, the Scuttlebutt, we just released an episode today, Monday, all focused on Team Foster. Team Foster is a nonprofit run by Nick Learman. Nick is the type of guy that when you talk to him, he makes you want to run through a wall. He gives you so much inspiration, so much energy, 1000% of himself in this conversation. He is the founder and executive director of Team Foster, which their whole mission is connecting veterans with service animals. And I had a lot of people that were in the waiting room, so hopefully they're not mad at me for giving them a couple minutes to join here. But he runs Team Foster. Team Foster was recently in Pittsburgh, over at the University of Pittsburgh, and they did something called the Rough Ride, RUFF, Rough Ride, where for 24 hours, they had a spin class, spin competition. Everybody's on bikes, teams. They were all spinning to raise money to be able to connect veterans with service animals. I set up a table there through VBC. I got to host an hour and just go around and talk to guys that were on the bikes, servicemen and women, veterans who were on the bikes. And I had a great time. It was a phenomenal experience. Team Foster, Nick, he said, yeah, I'll come on the Scuttlebutt to talk about this. Team Foster was named after his battle buddy who was killed in action, Eric Foster. And I would say check out the Scuttlebutt if you want to hear Nick's story and hear him also talk about his friend Eric. Really great guy, and I hope you get the chance to listen in on that. But let's get to our main event tonight. Thank you all for bearing with me while I went through all of our announcements. We'll take a little station break here in a bit, about 8 o'clock, to go over some more stuff. But Gus, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Gus, thank you so much for being here, being a part of VBC Happy Hour again. This is our second conversation with you. It's wonderful to have you back. But I wanted you to see your book, Moving Mountains, there on the screen. I wanted to get everybody that wasn't a part of that first conversation we had with you back in January. I thought, hey, let's have you give us sort of maybe a Cliff Notes version of why you chose to join the Army and lead us up to the point where MRF, because that's our main focus tonight, but lead us up to your time in the Mekong Delta.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'll try to be careful not to bore you with some of the details here, but it's interesting for me. Graduated from Penn State in 1964, was in ROTC. In those days, they would give out regular Army commissions to the top guys. I didn't get one. And the sergeants got together and petitioned the PMS, the Professor for Military Science, because I did so well at summer camp, that I should get one. I was called into the PMS's office. He said, Pagonis, I only met you a few times. We have one regular Army commission that's available. We have no one else to give it to. Would you like to have it? And I said, sure, because I was getting married and I figured I better get a job right away. I went in with the idea I'd stay for a few years. However, I had an exciting career. I patrolled the Berlin Wall when I was a young lieutenant, had about 3 escapes. In those days, the Berlin Wall went all the way around Berlin, but it wasn't just the wall, it was mainly a fence. The wall was only in downtown Berlin. While I was there, I was in the infantry, and I got transferred to the Transportation Corps, which I really didn't want to do. But when I graduated from Penn State, my major was in trade and transportation, so they said, you're regular Army, you go in the infantry for a couple of years, then you'll go to transportation. I tried to fight it, and again, if you were here last time, I think I mentioned this story. Once the general said to me, I'd gotten some kind of award for maintenance, and he said, if you ever need anything, come up and see me. Being a stupid second lieutenant, I actually went to Augsburg from Munich and walked in, told the secretary, he said, come in and see him. So I went in and saw him, and I said, I really wanted to stay in infantry. In those days, there was just no exceptions made. You had to go into your basic branch you were commissioned in. And it was General Rowney. He was an interesting man. He had actually served with MacArthur, and it helped set up the invasion of the Incheon invasion for Korea. And he said, Pagonis, I lost. I'm going to make you my aide. That way you'll be branching material and get to see the division operate. So I said, fine. After about a year of that, Vietnam was kicking in. It was 1967. And so I was in Germany, but I volunteered to go to Vietnam, as most of my fellow lieutenants did also. So I got orders, and it said, you're going to go to the 1097th Transportation Medium Boat Company. It was a command. So the general said, you don't want to turn down a command. Just go ahead and go to the Transportation Corps branch, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, which got me into the supply chain, and it worked well in the long run. So I showed up in Vietnam. This probably happened to many of you. All the officers had to be put in a room, and they would decide, forget what the orders said, where they would send you for the need. Vietnam owned everything once you got in country, sort of like we did in the Gulf War also. So I got called in, and they said, well, you're not going to the 1097th. You're going to work here at Vong Tau in port operations. I'll tell you, I was unhappy. Was a mild statement. Fortunately, an ingenious first sergeant who was my first sergeant in the 1097th, got a hold of me. He wasn't supposed to be in this area. Got a hold of me. He made a phone call. He said, "Hey, I know a place where you can jump the fence. Go ahead and jump the fence. I'll pick you up. You go and sign in and take command. Our company commander left already. I don't have any lieutenant that can do it. I want you to come and do it." So I went out there. He was right by the fence, had worked it out with his other NCOs that worked at the AG compound. I got through. I went and assumed command of the 1097th at Cameron Bay. Well, I had to go back and get my records. That's how they kept you, your finance and personal records. So I went in and I saw a full colonel of the AG Corps who read me the riot act, and I said, "Look, I came over here to be a company commander. The unit needed a company commander." Presented my case, and I figured, okay, he was going to say, "Tough, you report operations." He said, "You know what? Go ahead back and join your company." So he gave me my record. I showed up. Now, we were at Cameron Bay, and we were offloading ships, LCM-8s, landing craft. Was our boat, and they would load cargo in it, and we would take it to shore. This would bypass the pier and try to expedite stuff. But I had 5 boats down in the Mekong Delta that had artillery pieces in the whale decks. If you're familiar with the boat, you'll see a video that I have in just a minute. But that was too big, and you could not move artillery in the Mekong Delta because everything was so swampy. So they said, your whole company now, I think in an article it said 20 boats, but I had about 30. We had to go from Cameron Bay down to Vong Tau with no escort, just told follow the shoreline, which we did. We practiced using 50 cals that we had mounted on the LCM-8s before we left Cameron Bay. When we pulled in, the artillery commander came up and said, "Okay, you're in full support of us. Come up with some kind of idea because I can't. We have all these guns. We had 102 howitzers, which was for the airborne units, but they fire 105 round." And they said that, what can we do? And I had no idea. But once again, I went out to the troops and the sergeants. I said, "What do you guys think?" This one guy said, "Well, call the Smithsonian Institute and see what they think." Somehow, he got me through a landline. To this day, I don't know how he did it, because I thought I'd have to go to Mars Station. I called up, and I talked to somebody at the Smithsonian. I said, "I'm in Vietnam. We got this Mobile Riverine operation. We're trying to figure out what to do with the artillery." Lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, I get this big packet in the mail. During the Civil War, they could not put their cannons anywhere on land, so they mounted them on barges. And they moved the barges around with small little boats that they had in those days. And so that's what we did. We ordered barges, brought the barges in, put 2 howitzers on a barge, built space for the crew to sleep on it, and then we also put the ammunition on there for them to fire. Then we would hook up to them with an LCM-8 and crab through the water and take them into battle. We actually went into battle before the infantry, who were mounted on Navy boats. I think you guys got that spiel. I listened to some of it the last time when you talked about the Mekong Delta. So we would go in first. We got ambushed every time we left base camp because we cranked up 30 Mike boats, LCM-8s, and the kids did a terrific job. I say kids, they were young adults, but they did a terrific job. And we got several awards for the unit itself. But what I like to do is a movie that the Armed Forces Network make. It's not in best shape because it's made, 60 years ago. But Sean, if you could show that movie, I think it'll give a little perspective.
Sure, you can see it on the screen?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to turn the audio off of it, but I'll go ahead and play it. And if you want some of the audio to play, just let me know.
Sure.
And you'll see Gus here in a second. This is the gentleman that's introing Gus. Look like a young guy there, Gus.
I think I was 24, maybe 23 and a half.
Do you remember doing this?
I remember it like it was yesterday, but looks like my son. So at least that's what his wife used to tell me.
So what was the point of this interview that you were doing?
Can everybody else hear the audio?
I can turn up the audio here.
I mean, people can hear it though, right?
Once I turn up the audio, people will be able to hear it, but it'll be a little too difficult for them to distinguish the audio from the video from your voice. So if you want me to stop the video, just say.
Yeah, okay. What? Because if I hear the video, can you back it up? Because I do give an explanation. I haven't seen this video in about 50 years. Someone found it and sent it to me.
Brad, give me a thumbs up if you can hear this. You can't hear it? Okay, hold on. Let me make sure that it's, I'm going to stop share and I'll get it back here. Give me 1 second. Okay.
1097 has LCM-8s, and we're in direct support of the 3rd Battalion, 34th Artillery, which are attached to the 9th Infantry Division, 2nd Brigade. The 2nd Brigade has mounted the battalions on LSTs converted, and they are taken into battle by LCM-6s at the Navy maneuvers. Well, the artillery had to have some way to get into battle since there was no way to set up on the land. It was too soft, and so they put 105 howitzers on barges. They needed a way to maneuver these barges, and the LCM-6 of the Navy was too small, so they called on the Army and used the LCM-8s, and the 1097 was given the job.
So to support the troopers who are fighting down in the Delta regions in this Northland, and of course they need the artillery to support these people in their operations, so they just stuff them on a barge and they push the barges up and down the river to fire the artillery missions wherever they need them.
Yes, my entire company is 90% mobile. My crews live on the back of the LCM-8s, as you'll see in the film, in the living quarters. Inside the rail decks, the artillery has 5 direction centers, command posts. We have a first aid station, a unit day room, a we've built. We can't carry all our parts and repair kits. We also have a damage control vessel, so everything is on the boats or maneuvered by the boats or on barges.
Your organization has been described, sir, as a floating base camp, and that's basically what it is.
Yes, we have a small rear detachment of Dong Tam, strictly some supply, early room, and a stevedore platoon for offloading the U-boats, LCUs, a landing craft utility of the Army at Dong Tam. But the rest of the company is on the water. I have a little 6-boat of my own, which my command post and conference room is on.
So you can take your Navy and move up and down the river or anywhere in the Delta region and carry the artillery and fire right from the riverbanks and support anything that might need support.
Yes, not any difficulty. We're 90% mobile.
And also with your own shops and stuff on board, you can support yourself at the same time.
Yes, we're very proud of the fact we keep 100% of the boats operational. We have to, because everyone's committed. But we keep these 100% operational by the unique way of different ways of pulling maintenance on the river. So we can move the entire company, plus the 3rd Battalion, 34th Artillery's 2 batteries. Their 1 battery is back in Dong Tam, they're mobile, but they have 2 batteries, 12 guns, which are on 6 barges. 2 guns per barge, 3 barges per battery.
Well, sir, for a closer look at your fleet, we now have some film. Could you tell us a few things about it?
Yes.
I like how I'm just pausing this real quick because he says, we have some video of this and we're going to go to that. This seems like well before, the current nightly news where they just show video. But what were you looking at there, Gus? Like, what was he showing you there in studio?
Well, he didn't. He now will show you the video that the Armed Forces Network came and filmed. I hadn't even realized they had filmed them. I was headed back for R&R when I stopped by the studio. They asked me to stop by, and that's when I did this portion now. But if you turn it on now, it'll show you the actual equipment and movement and how it operated.
And the point of this interview was what, PR?
Yeah, I don't know. The Armed Forces Network would come out in the field. I didn't even know they were there. The brigade commander assigned them to us on our boats, which we got ambushed, and 1 guy got wounded. I'll never forget that. Because they thought it would be a safer place for him with us. I tried to explain that to the guy, but he didn't buy it. But anyways, I think you'll be interested. It'll show you everything that we did, and I can answer any questions about it after it's over.
So make sure everybody, if you have a question, please raise your hand on Zoom or go ahead and put it in the chat. I appreciate that.
The film starts out at Dong Tam, our base camp. We're preparing for a mission. Here's some individual carrying some of the equipment onto the battalion CP boat. which the battalion commander of the 3rd Battalion, 34th Artillery lives on. He has an orderly room, conference room, and living quarters on this one vessel. There's a truck for the 3rd, 34th, bringing some more supplies, sea rations, water, oil, and gas for the generators. The boats to be loaded on in our dock. Here I am discussing with one of my platoon sergeants how we should prepare for the move. Sergeant Curtis, 2nd Platoon Sergeant. And in the rear you can see the codex and stuff we load on the boats. Here we are in the company area at Dong Tam. We have approximately 10% of our company back at Dong Tam. We live in tents. And this is our orderly room right to the front, and a sign that we're pretty proud of. The Army sailors, and we support the Old Reliables, being the 9th Division. Back down at the beach, there's still some loading going on. Sea rations, and individuals are, you have to take everything you need because we don't know how long we're going out for. Here's a shot of one of the well decks of the boat. That's the cargo carrying capacity, and which is empty. And here they're taking a Jeep on.
I'm going to pause it real quick. I just see that Jim, you have your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, why not 155s? Why 105s?
Because of the weight. The barges are flat bottoms. 102s, we use 102, not the 105, because it's even lighter and smaller.
Sure,
And
sure.
155s, when they would go off, the whole boat would just rock, and they wouldn't be able to recover fast enough to send another volley out. So that
Did
was
you
the
try it?
rationale. Was
it ever
Again?
tried? General,
Yeah,
was it ever?
They did try it, experimented, and I gave them a boat and they laid it out. And then I'm not an expert in artillery, but they came to me and said the shock in the water just couldn't keep the boat stable enough to get ready for the next volley. It would have to be fired. So you got to remember the 2nd and 34th Artillery supported the 9th Division. The 9th Division infantry soldiers were, in fact, the Marines should have had this mission, and we were up, I was in the 101st, and we were up north, and the Marines should have been down in the Mobile Riverine Force at that time because they're trained. You wouldn't believe how many infantry soldiers died from getting off the ramps of the LCM 6s and stuff, monitors, and you'll see pictures of them that were taken into battle with no training. That's something that happened. You had played people in the wrong place, and they said, hey, just do it.
Good job, General. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm gonna have you lower your hand here, and I'll mute you, but we'll continue on with the video.
We have quite a few of those which are empty, which do not have anything in them, so we can still haul some of our ammunition and chow around. These individuals are loading on oil cans with some final construction work being done on one of their boats. Every time we come into port, we try to improve our facilities as much as possible. These are the mechanics working on the boats, checking them out, getting them ready for the mission. Like any mission, we're topping off our fuel, getting ready for the move out. We take a 5,000-gallon tanker with us normally, but we always top off before we move out on any type of combat mission. Here we are on one of the missions. Sergeant Munson, the maintenance sergeant, is with me in the wheelhouse. He's handling the boat right now as the coxswain. The coxswain, of course, is the driver of the boat. He's maneuvering in alongside another boat to drop off some mechanics so that they can check out the engine and see what the problems were. One of the vessels here is backing off, getting ready to pick up this payload, which is the artillery barge. On all moves, everybody wears combat gear, of course, and I have to be completely careful because the current sometimes up to 18 knots. If a man falls overboard, he can go right under. There's a case where someone gave me a call, was having some problems, so we call them and told them to come alongside of us, and we drop off the mechanic. I was working off the damage control vessel at this stage. Off to the right, you can see one of the barges being maneuvered. The damage control vessel pulls off to the side normally and observes, and if anybody's having any problems, you can go up alongside without any difficulty.
I'm going to pause real quick, Gus. The only question I have just specifically about the quality of the film. It seems like this was filmed prior to World War I with the graininess of the film. I'm guessing it's kind of like, for those of you who remember fax, I don't know who would remember faxing, but if you fax something and you fax something and you fax something over and over and over again, it kind of just got that like grain, like all the ink just kept bleeding together. Is that kind of what happened here?
Well, the guy sent me a 16-millimeter reel to use in a movie theater. It was huge. That was converted to a VHS tape, which was converted to a DVD, which is what you now have. So there's been like 4 iterations. I think if you were able to head up a 16 millimeter, I don't know where you'd get the projector, you'd get a much better photograph.
I gotcha. Okay, I was just wondering that because I was like, "There's no way." Video had come a long way at this point in Vietnam, so I would think that the video quality would probably be a little bit better. But back to the film.
Here's how we pull our barges normally along the port, left or starboard, right side of the boat.
Pause real quick. Jeff Arbalo, I'm going to ask you to unmute. You have your hand up and you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to find out, does he still have that 16 millimeter film?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do have. I still have the film. It's in a filing cabinet.
Okay. I think it would be great if we could possibly get that for the documentary.
Yeah, sure. I have no problem with it. It's just sitting there. Be happy to just tell me who I give it to, and we'll go from there.
And Jeff, we'll ask about this documentary as well as we get into the program. We want to hear more about that.
Okay.
There are 2 105s mounted on this barge, as you can see. And all moves, sometimes we move during chow hour, so individuals have to eat the chow while we're moving. This is a good case of it. Moves. And each individual is running a bike move while we're making a move up the river. Here's a Navy gunship, one of the monitors, which is in front of us, giving us some minesweep and some protection. A good shot of the boats being maneuvered with the barge on the right. Good shot of the shoreline. Some of the shores are very close to the boats. For example, some of the canals are only 25, possibly 150 meters wide. And we have these normally come out and wait for us. Here's one of our all-time first. We landed a helicopter while moving on our helicopter barge. Besides 6 artillery barges we maneuver around, we have this one helicopter barge we're landing all the choppers on, the air observer's chopper at the mission site. This particular time we tried it while moving and had no difficulty, so we do it all the time now. The vessel is moving about 3 knots. As you can see in this picture, we're fairly close to the shoreline. Sometimes the canals are only 25 meters wide. Another good shot of the artillery barge. You can see the artillerymen standing by, the 105 in the middle of the living quarters for the gun crews, and then the other 105. 2 105s to a barge. And on both ends are ammo storage for the 105 ammunition. This is a good shot of the Choga Canal. It's almost like a straight highway. There are some of the people from the villages along the side. They come out and watch us whenever we go by. This is Spec 4 Marlowe, one of our very good coxswains who's bringing a boat in alongside. He's having engine problems at the present time. We're dropping off the mechanic to give him a hand. Here we are now near Ben Luck, and we're just getting set up.
I may have paused for everyone. Where are we at? 9:05. Okay. May have paused there, Gus. I can get that video back up here in a minute, but why don't you take us through a bit of what we've seen so far?
Well, first of all, you can see the artillery barge, which was grabbed through the water. That means hooked up to the boat. The LCM-8. We actually defended the artillery guys. They had their own rifles because we got ambushed almost every time we would go out. we would crank up almost 30 boats, and you could, in the Delta was flat, you could hear us coming, and they didn't know where we were going to land, and you're going to see now how they put the barges next to the land with anchors to be able to fire the artillery pieces. But we would then fire artillery, and at that time, it was a coordinated effort. It was pretty great. The Marines, the Army, and Navy all operated as one team, and we had the PT boats that, the swift boats that we had for also fast protection and turning. But we had living quarters on those artillery barges, and on the back of an LCM-8, we built quarters for our troops. There was enough, as crew, there was 6 people, there was 6 beds, 3 beds, and so we would sometimes go a very long distance, and the crews could get rest, and then once we got to the location, we would disengage.
Are there any questions in the room here? I know, Rick, you mentioned, I can't believe that I could have been there. Radio men were being recruited for Riverine Ops. Is that right, Rick? If you... Oh, and as a pause, if we may pause for a second, Jack Bokey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Jack, we're going to have you on tomorrow night. You had raised your hand earlier in the program, so I wanted to make sure to get to you if you had something to talk about.
No, I didn't even know I raised my hand, so I apologize. I'll be talking tomorrow, not tonight.
Not a problem. Well, happy to have you on as always, and excited to hear your story tomorrow night. As I think the video that I had downloaded of what we were watching may have paused because of a faulty download. It's a night of technical difficulties, I'm telling you. But Cliff is also here with us, and I saw somebody in the chat say any other river rats with us, and John and Lynn Kern. John, I believe you were a coxswain of the 063
Coxswain.
What's that? Sorry, I missed that, Jim.
Coxswain.
Coxswain. Thank you. See, this is why I need this, is because I'm not a veteran. So these are the things that I would definitely not pronounce correctly as a civilian. So that's why I have you guys.
Coxswain drove the boat.
Gotcha. Thank you. Cliff, I'll ask you to unmute here as well.
There we go.
Dale also mentioned that this is priceless. He'd love to see a remastered version of that 16 millimeter. Says, I wonder if the Army or AF Navy still has the master. There's a fair chance that the film has degraded, so time is of the essence to remaster this. I wonder if it could be remastered. But Cliff, how much of that video were you relating to, please?
Well, I do have a question for Gus.
Please.
I spent many a night on a tango boat protecting their backside from the other side of the river. So we were connected with them quite often. But now as I look back, Gus, how did you compensate the barge as far as being level whenever the water in the river would change when the tide would go out?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as you know, the tide, it was huge. There were no dams anywhere in the Mekong Delta. So the tide would go out 10, 12 feet and you would be high and dry. And so when the tide would go out, the bottom they were flat bottoms, the barges would just sit on the bottom. And then if we got attacked, if they figured out where the artillery was, we'd have to fight them off. And then wait for the water to come back in and lift the barge right up. And believe it or not, it broke the suction for the Navy guys. I learned more about the Navy than I ever wanted to know in this operation. But the suction, you got to be careful when you hit the bottom. The water tide changes so rapidly. Will the suction of the mud not allow your boat to break loose? Because the currents were so fast, I think 12 knots or something or more, it just broke loose. So they were able to fire, and then when the tides would go out, they could still fire, and then we'd wait for the tides to come in. But the Viet Cong were not stupid. They knew when the tide went out, we'd be stuck there, and we'd get ambushed. Not ambushed because we knew they were going to come, but the Navy as you know, the boats had so much firepower on them. The swift boats, as well as the T-boats and everything. They just unbelievable mortars. I even had a mortar platoon assigned.
Go ahead, Gus.
That's it.
I also see RG Smith here in the room. RG, Russ, I'm gonna. Okay, Cliff, go ahead, and then we'll get to RG because I know RG had messaged us, and we had a story from him as well.
Just one more comment.
For the Veterans Club.
Go ahead, Cliff.
I was just going to mention that being stuck on the bottom of the river happened to us more than once. We'd turn around and the tide would go out and we had no water. But when it came back in, we were afraid that we were going to get stuck on the bottom. So we devised a way of getting out of that. We would throw concussion grenades over the side as close to the boat as we could, and it would form a pocket of air, and then we would just automatically come up off the bottom of the river.
I don't know if you can hear me. I forgot about that. I remember those days. You hear all these grenades going off because none of us could talk to each other. It's amazing, with no communications and radios stunk, how the Army, Air Force, not the Army, the Navy, and the Marines had total coordination in the Mekong Delta. And I don't know if people know this, we did clear out the Viet Cong, and they were gone for several years until they came back during the Tet Offensive, which the boats would get stuck. And those canals, you could see how close the land was. You couldn't see anybody that would be firing at you. And by the time the boats kept moving, you would fire, you'd be firing at the wrong place. But, okay.
RG, can you hear us?
I can.
Yes. You had emailed us about a story, and I know Todd said, hey, join us October 24th. We'd love to have you share it.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say I grew up in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and was in Penn State ROTC like the general, but I was about 5 or 6 years behind him. By the time I got to Vietnam, I was assigned to COMNAV 4V out of Saigon, and we were everywhere. We went out on operations and stayed current with what was going on. But the folks back in the mid 60s to 68 cleaned out the Delta, and most of the action was far less, and it was rather benign. And they took the 9th Infantry away from that structure, and it wasn't needed anymore, thanks to all their hard work. But everybody has a million stories, and I don't think anybody's heard too many of them. So thank you for asking me to chip in.
Sure thing. And I was able to finally get us back on track with the video. I apologize for the difficulties there. Let me share my screen again. Al, before I do that, Al Breininger?
Yes.
How are you doing tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Your name seems new to me.
Right, I was on the first one. That was my first exposure to you folks.
Excellent. Well, happy to have you rejoin us again. Do you have a question?
Yeah, a couple things. I was wondering if the 1097th provided their own perimeter security, or if they relied on one of the infantry battalions. I know the Mobile Riverine base itself always had infantry battalions on the shorelines, and then the Navy had its own what they called base internal defense with boats running around all the time. So I was just curious if the 1097th provided their own perimeter security, or if they relied on the other Army elements.
In the base camp, we had to provide our own security, and we did. We used to get mortared at Dong Tam almost every night. It was crazy, but that's just how it was. It was so bad you didn't want to run for the shelters or the sandbags. They were covering up protected areas. When we were out in the field, all the Marines did all the protection. When they, when the boats would go high and dry and stuck in the mud, our crews had to try to make sure their flat bottom boats wouldn't get sucked up and not be able to move. So that's sort of how it worked. In the base camp, everybody at the base camp at Dong Tam had their sector and had to protect it. And then the swift boats, if you remember those, Those were plywood vessels that could really maneuver and turn on a dime. When we were going and coming back, they would provide going ahead and stuff. But you had to be careful because, as I said, when we cranked the boats up, they're all diesel, old coming diesel engines. You could hear them forever. So the swift boats would try to lay back because, as you remember, those of you who were there, the river had all kind of tributaries that would switch off the big river, and that's where we would go to land the troops.
Yeah, one or two other comments. I see we also have another Penn Stater there. Gus, I was class of 1964, also Navy ROTC, and was in Vietnam at the same time you were, and had the privilege of escorting your barges to your shooting sites on several occasions. I was with Division 91.
Well, you guys did a great job. It's funny, you meet people over the years that just wave to them on a river.
Was there something, Gus, about like having served in that area later on in life, getting back to the States, you were just like, I don't ever want to find myself on a river again?
No, not really. I tell you, we're talking about all the negative stuff. First of all, most Army guys had to eat the sea rations. We would steal food from the Navy. It had LSTs, and they had the Benoit, which was a big converted ship in World War II. And we would, the Benoit, right? And we would sneak out there, and I could get beer pretty easily. I'd send boats up to Saigon, get cases of beer, bring it down, and I would trade a beer, and the Navy guys could produce any part I needed for the LCM-8s. That's how we kept them operational. And they had one LST that all it did was fabricate parts for their boats, the boats that the Marines used to take the LCM-6s, which are all antiquated vessels. And so it's kind of interesting how we had to do all that kind of stuff. When I became a general in life, I tried to, here's a shot of Dong Tam. This was in the middle of nowhere, and they cut it out, and it became like a little city. But
certainly looks like a city. How much acreage did this cover?
I don't know, but it housed a lot of the Marines. Although the Marines also had a ship that they could sleep on that they had in the Mobile Riverine Force. The Navy had maybe 10, 12 ships in the fleet. They even had a rear admiral who was the commander of everything. It's interesting. This is the funniest story I have. Westmoreland was visiting. He was on one of the big Navy ships, and the Navy was all in their whites, and bands were playing. I was coming back from a mission. When I get to the last 4 or 5 kilometers, everybody left me because the Viet Cong had left. And I'd come through there, and my troops were never dressed the way they thought I should have them dressed. They had to wear a flak vest, but they didn't wear a shirt, and we didn't shave while we were out there. And the band's playing, and one of my guys said, "Hey, they're having a band for a pass and review." And sure enough, there's Westmoreland taking a pass review, and here comes all the Army ragtag LCM-8s with guys not shaved and dressed. So I had to be called. I was called into the Admiral's office, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever been on a ship where an admiral was there. It was unbelievable. It was like a house, and he read me a riot act. And I look back at my career, and I'll tell you, I've been so lucky. The thing that always saved me were the non-commissioned officers. And the troops, the same in the Gulf War. They're the ones that really run. They deserve all the credit for getting things done. But this shot brought back. See, look at the size of that. I think that's a barge. It's not a vessel. I think that's a barge in the front there.
Here in the bay.
Say again.
In the bay here in the center, or
yeah. But see the water, the river came up right to Dong Tam. Dong Tam was dug out and filled. The Marines and the Seabees did all that, I believe. Because I got there in '67, and I stayed in command of the company for 12 months. Most people rotated every 6 months, and I didn't want to leave, and they said, no, we don't need to bring somebody else in to figure out how to do this stuff. But yeah, it looks like there's water behind it, but I don't think it is. I think that's
No. Correct.
I think that's land. Yeah.
Right
Yeah,
on.
here, I'm gonna let's see here, go over to the links here, the chat, and I know that Brad had a question. Was training done according to doctrine or operation guides, or was it done by in-country experience alone?
All of the above. As usual, you have guys in the Pentagon and higher ranking people given, hey, doctrine says you do this, you do that. And then when you get on the ground, you find out, hey, I don't have much, I don't have mortars. All I have is my rifle.
Yeah.
We had at that time, that was it. That was your protection. And then people would say, well, you can't call for, how do you call for mortar fire? A transportation guy has no idea how to do that. Fortunately, I spent time in the infantry, but, you still have to have the coordinates. So actually, doctrine was laid out. I've been very fortunate in my career. We wrote the doctrine, which would never be used again. And when I went to the Naval War College, I was an exchange officer. I didn't go to the Army War College. While I was there, I went into their archives, and sure enough, there was all kind of stuff in there by the Mobile Riverine Force. But I think somebody said in an article I read, very few people know what happened in the Delta and how it pacified the area. And you could see, when I first got there, you never saw farmers with their rice in their boats going to market. By the time I left, except for the Tet Offensive, which the Viet Cong didn't win. Okay, in the Delta, they were all wiped out. But the news media, it was when they attacked the whole country simultaneously, which no one thought would be able to be pulled off, which was pretty impressive. That the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese regiments, in a massive coordination, attacked everywhere simultaneously. They lost thousands and thousands of troops, but it was a coordinated attack. And I think the president Johnson had just said we're winning the battle in Vietnam, and then boom, all these films came out of this counteroffensive. No discussion of how it really destroyed their forces, but they recovered. That was a long answer to your question. Hopefully I answered it.
Brad shaking his head yes. You may not be able to see him, but yes. Rick, I believe, who is a Navy veteran, said, what were tango boats?
Well, I think the gentleman was calling about LSTs, land LST tangos, right? I think that's what he was using terminology.
RG, you're waving your hand.
There we go. There, yeah. Well, see, now it's a great shot. That big, large vessel is where I think it's one of the maintenance. Yeah, because the helicopter pad. I think it was one of the maintenance vessels that have. And then the LCM. See, those are LCM 6s. They're smaller than LCM 8s, and they had turrets on them. Some had 50. In the front is where the troops would be to go to the land, and they drop the ramps. Yeah, this is a maintenance vessel, and the boats are tied up there for maintenance. And they would not allow LCM 8s to tie up. And so we would only go out there at night when nobody wasn't around. And the Navy guys, the Navy enlisted people would work on any boat that I brought them. Never a question. By doctrine, the Navy said, hey, we're not giving you parts for your LCM 8s. And then that ship there, they could produce any part known to man that goes on an LCM 8. Yeah, that's a good shot. And see the brown water? That's fairly close to land. And then the river was that wide down at Dong Tam.
Yeah, at points it was a mile wide, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I just know it was very, very large. But I learned about the Navy was there, but I learned when the water starts turning brown, you better make sure you don't go too far. You'll be go high and dry.
RG, you were waving your hand. Go ahead.
Hey, that looks like the Benoit, the USS Benoit, which was barracks.
Oh,
And,
okay, the Benoit, which is was the admiral ship, right?
It was the command ship at the time I was
Yeah.
there, and I think there was the Tudui and some others, but Benoit with the helicopter deck on top is identifiable. And those boats tied up alongside, most of them are tangos. The one in the center you can see looks like it has a chopper deck. The rest are still ragtops. Those were all
Right.
converted to landing decks by the time I got in there, about 70.
This a landing deck right here where I'm circling?
The center grouping, the shorter one of the three. That one right there with the X on it.
Okay.
Choppers could
That's the
drop off
helicopter
and pick
pad.
up people. That frame was used for monitors, which were like floating tanks with 105s in the front, Zippos that had the napalm cannons in the front, and douche boats they called them, with a big sprayer that throws up chunks of water size of a Volkswagen to break up bunkers on shoreline. But that same frame was used for that line of boats. Then there was the PBRs, the Alpha boats, and of course the Swift boats.
Yeah, that's the name I forgot to mention, was a Swift boat. Yeah, this is and that's a gun turret on the front. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a monitor, an early monitor with a smaller, what is that, a 40 millimeter or something up front there? A lot of them had a 105. And similar, there was one called a CCB they have on display out in San Diego that was a command floating boat that was more in charge of things and had a little less weaponry, and there were commanders on board for that operation.
I don't know a lot about this, but I think the Mobile Riverine Force was organized on the west coast of California, and a lot of bright guys got together and figured out what they would need to have a riverine operation. The Army, they just sent me down from Cameron Bay because they couldn't mount the 105s, they called them, but they were really 102s. And I used the 105 interchangeably, but they couldn't mount them, and then they couldn't maneuver them. The LCM-8 was it had 4 engines in it, 4 engines, 2 on each bank each side, and they could maneuver those barges, and the coxswains really could turn those things on a dime. It was amazing how well, especially with the current. And so that's how the artillery was. Now, the artillery was an Army unit, and that's why they figured, okay, the Army has boats, let them use them. We had none of the pre-planned, or we had a POW in one of our well decks where we had prisoners. We had a hospital where they actually conducted operations, pretty serious operations. The helicopter pad was, we just took one of our barges and did that so we could land helicopters. And where the helicopter barge was is where we had our our hospital. I even had a day room I put in one of them.
What's the ribbing here on the side and top of the boat?
That's bar armor.
Yeah.
What did
Rebar.
Rebar.
It was mounted outside the frame of the craft to explode RPGs or B-40 rockets coming in from outside before they get in and do further damage.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that could
ingenious.
Could disperse the flak and not cause serious damage to the actual boat itself.
It wouldn't enter the boat frame or the coxswain house or whatever. Ideally,
I don't think any of these boats ever got sunk by enemy fire.
Oh, there were a few.
There was one.
Rick mentioned. Go ahead.
I've got a series from one of my photo guys of an Alpha boat that was hit from behind, and it was wide open on the backside, and it sunk. And a few others did, but they were able to raise them up for the most part.
Rick mentions in the chat, my understanding of LSTs was large, slow targets and can-do ships. I served aboard too. Jim, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I kind of backing up a little bit, but interesting that picture of Dongtam. Of course, Dongtam's not there anymore. It was very close to Mito, which is right down the river. I mean, and that's very much a vibrant town. I served on the forward communications center boat with the 3rd of the 34th Arctic. We always had at least one battery with us, 105s mounted. So we had, at least that. We had a helipad, and I spent at least 6 months before I even got back to Dongtan, out there, 12 on, 12 off. I was a radio operator, Spec 5 radio operator, and basically worked in the war room, I guess is what you would call it, because we had the entire map of Kenwa province. And that's what the 3rd of the 34th operated most of the time on the Songhamlong River, the tributary of, that might sound familiar to some of you guys that know about that, but alongside the Navy, it was a collaboration of both Army and Navy. It's incredible how we got together. Also, you failed to mention the Air Force, because we would almost every day get Air Force support that would come on station and looking for targets. And it was our kind of, we had like 6 radios, 3-4 guys on 24/7, and it was pretty well coordinated. Believe it or not, we had West Point grad officers in charge. They, you know how things get screwed up, but these guys seem to have their heads screwed on pretty well. Anyway, I served like 6-7 months there in 1969, and it was mostly support for infantry, air assaults, as well as some of the Mobile Riverine Force units that these tango boats and that would drop off troops and go on missions and things. It was an amazing coordination effort. In general, you probably know a little bit more than I do about that. I mean, I was a Spec 5, on the radios, but boy, do I remember all that. And it was, I was drafted, and I was caught up in it. But anyway, that was my personal story. But I sure enjoy hearing you talk about the early parts of the artillery part of it, because that's really what my MOS was, 13 Echo 20, which is fire direction control.
Right.
And it was I never really got to use that so much but I understood how to what was going on, because I was right there in the middle of the action.
Thank you, Jim. And Cliff, I see that you have your hand raised as well. Cliff, I'm going to go ahead and share a quick picture of you. Can anybody tell me what is wrong with this picture?
Oh, come on. That should be a beer and not a Pepsi can.
Cliff, you had your hand raised?
Yeah. Actually, the confusion on that photo of Dong Tam is because that picture is reversed. If you go back to that,
Yes.
the canal that you see on the right side should be on the left side.
Let me pull that up for you real quick. And we also have a couple more questions we're going to get to in the chat here.
And the other thing, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that long canal. Okay, that should be on the left-hand side. So just take that picture and turn it around.
So when someone developed that, they flipped it.
Right. Now, the one thing you don't see in the middle of the harbor there, they had 2 large YRPBs, I think they called them. They were repair ships. Now, when I was there in '68, they were already there. And then they had some type of maintenance ship there that I think was operated by civilians. What they were doing there, I couldn't tell you. But going back to the troop ship that you had a picture of, that was taken in 1967, and that ship was called the USS Benawa. Now, at one time, we had 3 of these troop ships there, the Benawa, the Nueces, and the Mercer. And they were all in 1967. The 9th Infantry actually lived on these boats. So when they would go out on operations, then they would get on the boats, 40 troops to a boat, and they would get placed out into the jungle. By the time I got there, they were just about done with that. And so they were using them mostly just for support for the Navy. Now, the repair ships were LSTs that they had out in the middle. and there would be at least 2 of those there. And they didn't have the luxury of having a barge alongside. So you had to climb up a ladder and walk on this kind of a plank that was sticking out. A lot of the PBRs would tie up to them. But yeah, that's that picture was in 1967.
Thank you. And before I move on, Dale Gold, you put a question in here. Did they have to lay the artillery for both high and low tide? That displacement affects the trajectory from each gun, even for the limited range of 105 millimeters or meters?
Millimeter, right.
Millimeters.
That's beyond my technical or common knowledge. All I remember is we put them in there, the tide would go out, the barges would sink down. I didn't know they used to use grenades to break it loose. That makes sense. But that's all I remember. I will tell you one thing before I forget. A friend of mine sent me a video from Dog Tam. It's a resort center in that part of the world right now. So it's this huge city. And they take people on the small little canals coming out of Dong Tam on tours. And this was Americans on this one tour, and they took a video, and the guy knew I'd been in that area, sent it to me. And it was kind of interesting. It didn't look like anything was the same.
Larry, you mentioned in the chat, were any of these ships used by the Vietnamese boat people to escape in 1975?
I don't think the riverine craft were capable of going out in the blue water at all. PBRs could, choppers could, and we turned everything we had that floated over to the Vietnamese in 1971 and 72, so they owned everything.
Cliff?
Well, we actually took our boat. I can't remember where we were going. I think we were getting ready to turn them over to the Vietnamese. And the rough waves out in the ocean just about knocked our teeth out. I mean, it was just up and down. We were bobbing like a cork out there. But I later read that most of the boats that we gave to the Vietnamese, they ended up selling them to Japan for scrap iron. And half of them, they couldn't operate, and they ended up sinking them.
If your boat couldn't float or fight, you didn't have to go out and float and fight. So they found ways to burn oil, destroy the engines, and not maintain them so they could get through their war.
Al, you have your hand raised. I'll ask you to unmute.
Sean.
Yes.
This is Bob Flagg. I was with Echo 3rd of the 60th, and Cliff is correct. That is the Benoit. Fortunately, the 3rd of the 60th always stayed on the Benoit. The 3rd of the 47th, there was always 2 battalions on the 2 ships, and we rotated on a monthly basis, 3rd of the 47th, 4th of the 47th, and 3rd of the 60th. Fortunately, 3rd of the 60th always got the Benoit, which was nice. I think we had way better food than probably the other bunch, because 2 Westmoreland, they were coming aboard, and we enjoyed our stay on that. Looking at the bank over there, we used to have beer call, but they'd stick us over on the bank somewhere. And one day we started getting fire, and everybody jumped in the river, and the beer got shot up. And at that point, from that point on, they let us have beer call on the pontoon rather than getting anybody shot.
2 beers.
Thank you, Bob. And Al, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I don't think any of the large ships, the APBs, the Benoit, the Colleton, or even the repair ships were ever turned over to the Vietnamese. The boats were, but I know the Benoit ended up being part of the Philippine Navy, and some of the other berthing vessels ended up in shipyards in Japan. So I don't think any of those vessels were part of anything related to the escape from Vietnam. The small craft might have been, but that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, the Benoit ended up, well, first of all, it was not decommissioned, but they made it a barrack ship somewhere for outside of Vietnam. And then they gave it to the Philippines. And after they finished with it, it's now a reef somewhere out there.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
Cliff, you shared this picture with us today. I also have one of a patch, but did you want to chat about this this setup?
Well, actually, that's the ramp on the LCM 8s that they could lower down. No, I just wanted to send those to you, and in case nobody had seen those before. And I'm not familiar with that patch, but I sent it to you just because I saw the 9th Infantry on it.
Anybody here familiar with the patch?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I made up a patch like that for the 1097. In fact, I'm looking at it right here. Our patch, we put an LCM 8 in the middle, and River Raiders was Can-Do River Raiders was the motto. But that's the 2nd Brigade, 9th Infantry patch, which I think they made up. And these patches were not authorized. They weren't made by the Army. These are patches that were made in country. Pretty sure that's correct.
And when you see River Raiders, that more or less refers to the Army side. And if you call somebody a river rat, you're calling. I mean, that's a sailor term.
Bob Miswa asked, "Did you take any incoming fire from recoilless rifles?"
Well, there was a 75 recoilless that they say was the one that went through my boat and wounded me.
Yeah, I on the river when you got attacked, they had recoilless rifles. They had a lot of smaller ones. I think they even had a shoulder, small, very, very small recoilless rifle, but it would cause damage. That was for sure.
Larry Kilmeyer, you put this in the chat. Very interesting. I had a very good friend who was on an LST coming up the river when a VC rocket entered it as a dud. They packed that area with mattresses just in case it did explode. Later, it was removed from the side and no one was killed. Thank God. And Brad Washabaugh, you put a link here in the chat. Everyone can check it out. Anyone familiar with the enemy frogman attack on the USS Westchester, an LST?
Westchester County. I wasn't there, but I knew one of the officers on the bridge at the time. It was a pretty severe attack and several sailors were killed.
Brad put that in the chat, the history.net.com article on that specific attack. And real quick, I want to get over to Jeff. Sorry about that flipping of the PowerPoint here. I wanted to take a quick station break just to remind everybody here that we are the Veterans Breakfast Club. Our mission is creating communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. We do this through several different programs, one being Happy Hour that we hold every Monday night here on Zoom. Another is In-Person Breakfast that we actually have one coming up tomorrow morning at Christ United Methodist Church in Bethel Park here in Pittsburgh. We will be getting veterans together to share their stories at that event. I'll share my screen. We also hold tours. This one just completed. As you can see, it's the 24th. Todd, the executive director, he is a historian. He took a trip with veterans up to Boston. They checked out the USS Constitution as it turned 225 and held a VBC event up there, got veterans together, shared stories. He's going to be talking about that tomorrow night whenever he joins us for Greatest Generation Live. And we are also pairing with Vitalent on a blood donation drive. If you go to Vitalent and you tell them that you are with the VBC, you can give them the code D062 or just say, hey, I'm with VBC. And for every blood donation, VBC gets $15. So drain your veins. I think that I'm gonna TM that motto. I'm gonna trademark that, drain your veins, and help to support the VBC through blood donations. Also, we have partnered with Bamboo Bob, which is a coffee producing organization, company that is in Vietnam. This is pure Vietnamese coffee that we get shipped here to Pittsburgh. You can buy this coffee from our website for every bag that you purchase, which is $12. The VBC gets about $3. I've heard this is exceptional coffee, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Visit our website there and the shop portion of our website, and you can click on Vietnam coffee and order a Bamboo Bob bag. These gentlemen are very wonderful. They don't just sell coffee. They are invested in our community, in our network of veterans. They love joining us for our live events. So we're always happy to have them. Thank you, Bambo Bob, for helping support us. And our VBC magazine. This is our latest issue, just came out this fall. If you do not get this magazine in the mail, it's because we don't have your address. It is absolutely 100% free. All you have to do is email us your address. We'll make sure you get a copy in the mail. If you sign up for it, you'll get it quarterly. It's a wonderful magazine to be read cover to cover. Every review I hear of it, and that's not just because I work for VBC. It's an amazing magazine. It's written mostly by Todd. We do also have submissions. Henry Shepke, if you've been with us through the whole program, who I mentioned earlier, he, like I said, goes out and gets autographs from veterans. He reached out to a survivor of the Bataan Death March who responded to him with, get this, a 17-page letter. We asked Henry to go back to him and say, hey, do you mind if we print this in the magazine? He said, not a problem. I'd love to have it printed. So we got Henry and this veteran to get us to be able to submit this into this magazine. It's in the fall issue. We have, I think, 3,500 more that we are ordering because we quickly sold out of this magazine. So again, get us your address. We'd love to share it with you. The front cover highlight story is Sandra Ortega, who was the first woman of color to be commissioned in the Air Force by Eisenhower. Wonderful woman who lives in Baltimore. Her story is pretty incredible.
Is it possible for me to break in for a minute?
Sure. Who? I don't see you highlighted on my screen, so I'm not sure.
My name is Fred Parker. I'm logged in. I'm listening to this.
Oh yes, Fred. Hi. How are you?
Yeah. I'm a retired Marine of 22 years, and I just wanted to mention that the only reason I know about you guys is because of my very, very good friend John Kern.
Yes.
Who is also listening in this evening, and I just want to thank all you guys for your service and mention how much I've appreciated over the years the stories that I've gotten from John Kern and the information he sent me. And he called me this evening and told me about this this video cast, and so I'm glad to be a part of that. And so thank you all very much for that. I might mention that later on in 1976. I was a part of a Marine detachment that was administratively attached to 2nd Battalion, 9th Infantry in Korea. And we had some interesting times there that I can tell you about some other time. But anyway, thank you guys. It's been fascinating over the years learning from my friend John about you and your service in the Mekong Delta. I unfortunately missed all of the Southeast Asia War Games. But thank you all very much, and I appreciate that. So
thank you, Fred, for chiming in. We appreciate that. I appreciate you joining us too, John Kern. Thank you for networking for us. It's always a pleasure to see a new face. And Fred, if you're new to us, please shoot us an email. We'd love to connect with you, and you're welcome to join us anytime on any of our programs. And last little announcement before we get back to the main event here. I will put into the chat a survey link. It's a quick, like 3-4 questions. Let us know what you thought of the program tonight. We're always happy to hear feedback. There it is in the chat. And thank you so much for hearing the station break. Get back to the regular scheduled program here. Al, you have your hand up. Was that from before, or is this a new thought?
I just wanted to circle back to the rebar that was on the side of the boats and talk a little bit about that and the vulnerability of the boats. The rebar stood about 18 inches off of 1-inch armored plating that was added to the hull. The LCM-6 was basically a 28-ton boat as designed for amphibious operations. Once they ended up putting all the armor plate and armament on the boat, the ATC came in at 56 tons, and the monitors, which were basically LCM-6s that had the ramp chopped off and 4 foot of round bow added, became 72 ton. So the boat slowed down from 11 knot capability down to 8 knot capability. Anyway, the trigger shield that was on the outside of that boat was designed to defeat a 57 millimeter recoilless rifle round. And through the testing that was done, from what I have been told, that it did that. It was successful. That the problem was we got into Vietnam and they were using RPG twos and mostly B-40 rockets. And those rockets would penetrate 7 inches of solid steel. So the boats could stand up and fight. The problem was, depending on where the hit took place, you'd get a lot of people sprayed with shrapnel. And many times the wounds weren't overly serious. If you look at the ratio of wounded to KIA, I'll just give you an example. In my year there, I had 3 KIAs in my division, and there were probably, well, in one battle, I know for sure, we had 77 wounded just in one day. So the wounded versus the killed was a big difference in the number, which was good. And in fact, the Navy was so confident in the design of their boat that the Captain Wade Wells, who was the Commodore of all the Navy operations for the Mobile Riverine Force, told me one time, he said, in April of 1967, when they started asking the Bureau of Naval Personnel to send replacements because we were taking wounded people, the response he got back was, "What do you mean you're taking wounded people? Those boats are designed to take a punishment." So that was sort of the mentality going in. And typically, the plans never come across as planned, and you have to adapt from there. So that's just the comment I had.
Thank you. Jeff Arbelo, I mentioned I wanted to get to you about your documentary. I'm asking you to unmute if you're still in the room here. Jeff, thank you again for joining us. And can you talk to us a bit? You put it into the chat here to see the trailer for Mobile Riverine Force, the documentary. I'll put it again into the chat just so everybody has it. Visiting Arbalo, I'm pronouncing that right, arbaloentertainment.com?
Close, it's Arbayo.
Arbayo, my apologies.
Okay. Most people say it wrong, but yeah, the 2 L's are like a Y.
It's all right. My name's spelled with a U, and I don't think anybody's ever gotten mine right. So I hear you. Can you talk a bit about the documentary, please?
Yeah, and sorry, my wife's having surgery right now, so I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting, and they keep texting me a bunch of different messages. So, we're working on the Mobile Riverine Force documentary. That's why I was asking. I believe his name is Gus about the footage, because we take the footage and we actually will send it off somewhere and get the reels converted, and we'll digitize them and have those reels converted so that we can clean it up and make it look as good as possible. We don't do what Hollywood does. Hollywood takes it to another level, but it's about $5,000 to $10,000 a reel. So we don't have that kind of budget. So but so far I think we've done about 40 different reels, maybe a little bit more, and then thousands of pictures, converted them over, even slides. And I hear a lot of the gentlemen talking about how people don't really know about the Brown Water Navy, the Mobile Riverine Force, that whole area. And that's part of the reason why we're doing the documentary, is because we know that the sacrifice that these men have given, and we want to tell their story, because it's so important for everybody to know what really happened, and that these guys were part of that war. And a lot of people, it's really interesting as I go through and have conversations with people and tell them that we're doing a documentary on the Mobile Riverine Force. They kind of look like, oh, what is that? And then I explain it to them. And of course, most people know the PBRs, and they go, oh, are those little fast boats? And I always tell them, no, these boats were slow. Heavy and slow is, what we were told. And so I tell them that's what they were, heavy and slow. And so our whole mission here is to really right, a wrong, and tell their story of what they did. And, we're continuing to do, we have a few more interviews that we're still trying to get in, and we're still collecting some film and pictures. And, obviously COVID did a number on us, and it delayed the process. But, the fact that the Mobile Riverine Force, the Army and Navy working together really hadn't been done to that degree since the Civil War. That's a huge part of, really the story and how it really was an advantage to come back and use that same tactic again. And I think when you really start to find out the vastness of this story, because it's Army and Navy together, you realize how this thing is it's huge. And I mean, I know you put up the video or the picture of Scramble the Sea Wolves, which we did. And the Sea Wolves did a lot of like these small firefights. And so the same thing happened with the Mobile Riverine Force, where they had a lot of these smaller battles on the way where they were taking troops in or bringing troops back, or even just, waiting as they dropped off the troops and they were waiting there. So there's so many different stories that you could go into. And that's what our job is to go through and try to find the different stories that, that we can really put together and find several people that corroborate that story. And that's the hard part, is getting all those smaller stories and trying to fit them all together. But what these men have done on both sides, the Army and the Navy, was absolutely amazing. I mean, I tell people what they did, and I think it blows people away today. I just don't think people would want to do that same mission, because it almost sounds insane when you hear some of the things that they did. So
definitely. Well, thank you, Jeff. I hope everybody checks out the trailer for that. Good luck with finishing up the documentary, and I hope your wife's surgery goes well. I want to bring up in the chat here, because we only have just a couple minutes left. Don Nemchek, and maybe Gus, you can answer this for us. Was the Riverine Force also known for their black berets?
I don't remember that. I was lucky. Kept the guys in a helmet. I don't remember anything about the black beret. I will tell you, there is a Mobile Riverine Association that has a reunion every year, because I get literature from them. Mainly made up of the Navy force, although they have a section here on the 1097th, and that's how I get tied up with them.
This shot that they're
trying to put together some kind of video on the Mobile Riverine Force.
Yeah. Oh, real quick.
Sure, Jeff.
Yeah, that's the project that we're doing. That is the project that we're doing. And yeah, we're working on both sides. We've interviewed, quite a few Army and quite a few Navy. And so we're trying to put the stories together. And that's why we're collecting pictures and, film, so we can tell the story as complete as possible. And then, we also are, we're always looking for sponsors, because obviously, that's the hardest part about doing a documentary is raising those funds. So,
Cheryl and Ed Rural, I see. Ed, you have your hand up, and then I'll go to Al and Cliff here. Ed, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Hello.
Kenneth.
Can you hear me?
Ed,
yeah.
Ed, hold on one sec. Ed, how
I was
you
with
doing?
A Company 3rd of the 60th. I was on that Benoit for a long time. But my question is something different. Does anyone know where you can get sea rations at a reasonable price?
Re-enlist.
Re-enlist.
There you go.
Tomorrow. We just get right on that. 7 a.m. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to give you a Navy grunt's perspective on that bar armor. I was an E4 on a Monitor, and that was made out of rebar and had 18 inches of styrofoam behind it. Was supposed to absorb shrapnel. It had the B-40 rockets had heat. They were heat rounds. They'd go right through one side and out the other. Spray shrapnel all through the inside of the boat. We had napalm on our boat, and we have 6 tanks below decks with aviation fuel and napalm. And that rockets, thankfully, because the fuel tanks were round, rockets would bounce off of them. It was a little hairy. But also the bar armor, we would swim in the Mekong. We shouldn't have done, but we did. And we climb up that bar armor. Well, that styrofoam was full of those two-step snakes. They're supposedly a poisonous snake that take 2 steps and you're dead. And they're full of, I acquired a mongoose for a pet. And the next day, the whole deck was full of these dead snakes and rats from living in that stuff. So I was not a fan of that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is going out in the ocean with those monitors. We did that, leaving from Dong Tam and going up around to Tay Ninh and Giant Slingshot, the Parrot's Beak area. So that was done. And our trip wasn't that bad. It was a little risky, but, you know, we're young guys. It was like being at Kennywood or something. That's
Kennywood, for those of you who are not Pittsburghers, Kennywood is our local amusement park. It's not the size of like Cedar Point or Six Flags. It's a bit smaller, but we still love it. Cliff and then Al.
I was just going to mention that when we did our combat training up at Mare Island, we were authorized to wear the black beret. A lot of people, purchased them. But once we got to Vietnam, very few of us wore those. Supposedly, the VC had a reward out for our heads if they could, chop off a head with a black beret on it. I guess that was a big reward for them. But yeah, we didn't wear them after we got over there. In fact, I lost mine. I lost mine after a month over there, and if you lost it, you couldn't find another one over there.
I'm highlighting for everyone, RG, you're holding up a black beret.
Yeah, this was mine, given to me down in Binh Tui in 1970. Given to me after a firefight, and they clipped the loop in the back if you were in a firefight, and they clipped it with a V if you were in a rocket attack at the time.
Who's that? He was an officer, wasn't it?
And Al, I'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I think just to comment on the black beret, the PBR folks were the ones that really were the wearers of the black beret from the time they got in country, and that was sort of their trademark. And I think as the Mobile Riverine Force operations started scaling back in 1969 with the Vietnamization, and the forces started becoming more joint, where the Mobile Riverine Force boats, the PBRs, and the Swift boats that started operating. I think the black berets probably got into a lot more use across all of those 3 forces.
Mm-hmm. Gus, I wanted to come back to you for any final thoughts here, like how the Mobile Riverine Force disbanded at the end. I know that it was highly decorated. Can you give us sort of the not the end of the story, but certainly where this continued to?
Well, first of all, I really enjoyed my Navy counterparts here and all their stories, because anytime I got close to the big ships was to figure out how to get some stuff for my own troops. But it's incredible when you think about it, how it was all integrated and very, very successful. That's the part that's amazing. It wasn't designed to be successful the way they originally set it up. It turned into being successful because of the troops making it happen. But yeah, my time in the Mobile Riverine Force was a year, and that was it. I remember it fondly, and man, that I'll never forget, because every day you never knew what was going to happen. So it was an interesting adventure. But I really did enjoy all these comments, because I knew what a monitor was, I knew what an LST was, and I did all that stuff. But the young captain, no one ever took the time to explain anything to me. And whenever I went near the Navy, I was always chased away. I wasn't even allowed to tie up at LCM 8. Somebody would come out and say, hey, you're not allowed to tie up here. But I think it's wonderful. A lot of people don't understand it. On the Mobile Riverine Force Association, I did send them a bunch of stuff. Hopefully you got it. I think I emailed it. I forget who I emailed it to. They have a newsletter that goes out. That's who I sent it to. But thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking about the 1097th and the Mobile Riverine Force.
Gus, always a pleasure. And I did actually want to get to you eventually about equine therapy. Someone mentioned that the other day, and then it sort of rung a bell in my head that you have a horse farm, a lot of 40 acres, and we don't have to talk about it now, but I thought, I wonder if Gus knows something about that.
Well, I moved my wife, we were married, we've been married 58 years and got married in college at Penn State. I moved her 30 times in 29 years. And when I left the Army, I went to Sears for 10 years. Then she said, we need to go home. So I came back here and we bought this horse ranch. We have Arabian, half Arabians, we have riding lessons and board. And it's near Prospect, Pennsylvania, right outside of Butler and Zenople. So, and that's about the extent of my knowledge of the horses. My wife runs the whole thing. I simply do the books for her. And if anybody's out this way, please give me a call. We'd love to show you around it. We have a website. It's called C&G, Charlie and G for Sherry and Gus Ranch .com. If anybody has an interest in looking at it.
I will put that in the chat, and I'm going to take you up on this, Gus, because last May, we took my 2-year-old to the Deep Creek area, which is a little south and south central sort of PA. She rode her first horse, loved every second of it. And, she wants to do it again. So I may take you up on that. Jeff, you have your hand up, and then Lisa has an announcement before we close out the program.
Yeah, I just wanted to just reiterate, if you could put up maybe the website, let people know that it's on the chat where they could go see the trailer, and just if somebody can't get onto that, it's our Bio Entertainment, so it's ARBALLO, ourbioentertainment.com.
Thank you very much.
Is there any materials that are available to go out to solicit, businesses that, we just can't just walk up to them and say, hey, this is what we want? Is there anything, any literature or anything like that we can provide to them?
Absolutely. If you contact me, I can send you the literature that you can give to the business.
Right. Okay. I solicit for the Military Order of the Purple Heart, and I've got a bunch of contacts that I think I might be able to get some money from.
That would be great. Thank you so much. I will grab your information.
Okay, and Lisa, you have a couple announcements here.
Yes, I just wanted to share with everybody. Sean mentioned earlier in the program, right about the beginning, that we do have a Veterans Breakfast Club live event that we're hosting at Pitt Greensburg on Saturday, November 5th. That is open to the public. So it's our students, but it's also open to the public. And we're excited because the VBC doesn't get to Westmoreland County too often. Breakfast is free. So if you're interested in attending, we just need you to RSVP, and the information's on the flyer. And then we also have that, it's November 5th, Wednesday, November the 8th, we have a film screening of a film called Bastards Road. It is based
November
on
9th.
November 9th. I apologize. Thank you. So it's based on U.S. Marine John Hancock. He basically walked 6,000 miles from the East Coast, and he ended at Camp Pendleton Gates, which is basically where he entered the Marine Corps. And he served in Ramadi and several other areas during the Iraq War. So it's actually a very intriguing film. And he's going to be zooming in with us from Arizona afterwards for a Q&A session. So that again is open and free to the public if you would like to come. So I just wanted to let everyone know.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I want to thank everyone, all of our guests tonight. Gus, thank you so much for joining. Cliff, RG, Ed, Jeff, Bob, Fred, Jim, everyone for contributing to the program tonight. Thank you so much for your patience over with all of the technical difficulties, but I still think we maybe not cranked it out of the park, but we certainly hit third tier on this one. So happy that you were all here Perhaps we'll do a part 3 of the Mobile Riverine Force, but I hope to see you all either tomorrow morning at Christ United Methodist Church or tomorrow evening. Come back on Zoom. We're gonna have a great conversation tomorrow night, as well as next Monday for our open conversation for Halloween night. Thank you all again, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.